Thank you for listening to the Dog Trainers Podcast, a podcast created by dog trainers for dog trainers, or anyone who's ever fallen in love with man's best friend. So there's going to be 3 volumes. There are currently 2. Well, there's one, but there's one about to be. What is the difference, would you say, in your mind, volume 1 to volume 2? And you mentioned a little bit about volume 3, but what can audience expect?
So for one, less typos.
Right.
It's actually the way it looks. It's put together. You guys haven't been able to see an actual finished product, but it's designed at a higher level, so that stepped up. So it should be more enjoyable as an experience. But the writing, I don't mean this egotistically, but I think I've finally learned how to write to a degree that I feel not necessarily like proud of, but not embarrassed of, which is a good space to be in, right? And so I'm pretty hard on myself. I can't watch the DVDs. I can't read the old books. I can't do any of that stuff. But I feel like the second book, I definitely tackled some heavier subjects. I did it in a more nuanced fashion. I think it's more of in some ways, this might sound like it puts people off, but it's a slightly more adult book. As far as the ideas being more deeply explored and maybe pushing some boundaries. And I really hope that we manage to tackle the stuff that we didn't tackle in the first one in a way that continues the journey of helping people do a better job with their dogs. Because frankly, when I started out in 2000, probably 2000, and there just wasn't much around like that, and so you kind of had to find your own way, and so I'm hoping to make a difference in that stuff.
You brought up exactly the point that I had written down here, which was, we've touched on it a little bit earlier, but I couldn't agree more that the second book, something that's different is you definitely dove in a little harder, so to speak, right? And we brought this up earlier because as I wrote it down, I noticed it kind of echoes the more firm tone in social media as well. And so I definitely feel that, and I can certainly feel the importance of that because I see it happening in real time too. Again, with social and stuff like that. Yeah. So I was reading the book, and there's that whole moment where like you're going through it, and of course it's good and everything. And I'm like, okay, I'm enjoying this. But then you read the one thing and you're like, there you go. And then you read another thing and you're like, aha, okay, so this is one of those type of books where it's important, I think, to tell people. Like I feel like the first book, if it kind of, begged the question like, hey, when was the last time you kind of looked at yourself? This one was kind of more like, hey, look at yourself, and in a great way, I wanted to bring that up, that it is funny that you can kind of feel the organic shift. And by the way, like people that do these kinds of things, like podcasts, YouTube videos, books and stuff like that, I personally find that there's the kind of person that gets nervous about it. Like they want the first book to be just absolutely perfect. And I can appreciate that because it's your book and there's that pride in it. Like I hate watching our old podcast. But at the same time though, from an onlooker's perspective, it makes it so special to be able to go through the journey with you. And I love that I can feel the more adult version of this book because it creates that timeline as a trainer of like, man, this many years ago, this other book changed my life. And then this other many years ago, it's funny that Sean is kind of on this kick because I've sort of been finding myself in the same place. I don't know if that means it's because society is just pushing us all like in the same direction as dog trainers or whatever's happening, or if we're just kind of in tune, but like it's so cool to be a part of the journey. And I think part 3 is probably going to have a super similar feel to it. And I would imagine when the second book actually drops, a ton of trainers are going to write you with that same sort of stuff.
Yeah. I'll be curious to see if it alienates a lot of owners, which it might. I think the first one was my fiance says first one was great, but it was just a little soft and a little easy going.
Okay.
And I totally agree with
which
her.
I think was good for an introduction to who you were.
Yeah, and
know?
you could be 100% right on that. Like, you don't want to come out guns a blazing and be like,
Yeah, you're like
look,
you suck, you
you
suck, you
guys,
suck.
it's time to cut your dog, and
Yeah,
so
yeah.
I definitely had to kind of find my footing, and then as I moved through it, I becoming better with writing, and also, but far more far more motivated about trying to spread information about, for me, which is really important, is not just the dog training, but human beings becoming stronger, more courageous, and standing up for themselves, which might sound like some kind of like political rah-rah speech, but it's
Yeah.
I watch so many people struggle, because struggle in relationships, personal relationships, canine relationships, friends, family, whatever. And it's almost always because boundaries,
Yep.
emotional intelligence has not been, something that they've worked on. And so it's kind of a kick in the ass to say, like, come on, guys, let's all move a bit
Yeah.
forward on this. And so it's definitely got a firmer approach from that. And I'll be curious to see if there's pushback on it, or if it's embraced. And
Yeah.
I honestly don't know until it comes out how people are going to feel about it. So,
Question for you.
yeah.
Was the book intended to be read in any specific order? Like, were the chapters purposely put in? Because I've been reading, obviously I got a book 36 hours ago, and I obviously couldn't read all of it.
Yeah.
So what I decided to do is I decided to go through the table of contents, and I just picked the coolest sounding chapters, and it's such an easy read, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
I guess, was it intended to read in a certain order?
No, actually.
Cool.
And so Seth Godin, who I'm a huge fan of, and he's really inspired. If you read his blogs, you'll see a lot of similarities and a lot of things vibe wise. We tackle very different subjects, but he did this book called It's Your Turn, and he designed it himself, top to bottom, all the pictures, all the design, every single thing. I don't think there's any. I don't think there's any page numbers, and it's like we borrowed heavily from him in the respect of like fonts that are big, colors that thing, just a little more playful, a little more interesting, and the whole point for me was that I wanted a book that was good looking, that was simple, that was profound, hopefully, and I don't want to use that word and make it sound like too like cocky, but valuable might be a better word. And then that you could open it to any page. You could have it on your table and just go da 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 da
I would
da.
love that.
Oh man, because I struggle really, really hard with reading books, especially like I'll read the first 20 pages and then I'll be like, right. So
I get you.
I struggle real hard with that. So what I try and do is make sure that the books feel not too big, that they're easy to read, but not dumbed down, and that you could go through any page, because that means like, hey, because people can feel like I read the first chapter, but man, I've got 8 chapters to go. And then they can feel like, okay, I'm not going to work through that. But if you could just go to any page, then I felt like that might be more helpful for people.
And it was great. I mean, like when I was reading this book, like, is it okay if I read some of the chapter names?
Yeah.
Is that okay? So I think it's hilarious because getting to meet you, via this podcast and getting to hear how you are, it's funny because I can hear the thoughts of these. So he has chapters called like Turning Babies into Monsters. Right?
Yeah.
Like that's hilarious. He has one called like the Zombie Apocalypse, right? And it's pretty good stuff. Like when you go into it, Creating Brats, which is a great one. Let's see, if you're rewarding crappy behavior, you're going to get more crappy behavior, right? I think it's just so colloquial and like easy and like
that was a tough one, because I was like, it just went a little harsh. The crappy behavior, it's like I couldn't find a better word for it. But and I asked everybody, they're like, "Nah, it's okay." And I was like,
I think it's okay.
I like this one. If you've got babies, you've got tantrums.
Yeah.
That one's really dope.
Yeah.
The zombie one I think was my favorite one too, actually, because I finished the book just earlier today. Sorry again, we got it so I was kind of like slamming through it. But you know what? A couple things that you talked about, like, I don't think that, like, the writing wise, this is something that you should be anything less than proud of, because number one, and the first one too, though, I thought, well, actually, to be fair, I got the Audible of the first one. So, like, I've seen photos of the tangible book inside, and I think the first one, if I'm not mistaken, it had like different fonts and things going on too.
Lots,
but just hearing it, I can tell that it was similar in format to the second book, actually reading this one. With that being said, I know you were talking about, like, your writing and stuff like that, but to me, like we talked about, I don't really listen to Audible books unless the author reads it. There's no better compliment in my mind as to, like, when someone writes something, if you know that person, it sounds like them. Like, I can read the book and hear your voice saying these things, and I think that was perfect. I can even imagine, like, how you would say the things that you're saying, and in that respect, I thought it was spot on. I actually kind of really enjoy the process of the book, in that it's almost like, I don't know how else to describe the format other than it's almost like scripture. It's just like a bunch of small points, you know. And I can understand now your intention of, like, I just want somebody to be able to open it, and wherever you are, start, and you're good, but it other than being an easy read and just very, like, accessible, if that's the word, approachable, it does find a way to, like, it is less daunting and it is easier to digest, and it does make a lot of good points, and a lot of times too, it avoids the need that people can have sometimes in writing books to be, like, overly wordy. You don't always need all that, it's just kind of like, here you go, here's a little, like, page and a half description of this, and then on to the next one.
Because you read one, it's short, and you're like, oh, I'll read the next one.
Yeah.
Okay, I'll also read the next one. Right? It's like a, in that sense, it doesn't progressively get harder. It just stays easy the whole way, and you just feel good reading the whole freaking book.
And to be honest, that was such a big point for me, because, like I said, I struggle. Like, I feel like any book that's over 200 pages should be outlawed. And
right.
I'm hoping to keep this under 200. And but for me, it's like that was the book that I would like to look at. That was so I was being very selfish. I thought it would work for other people, but it was really like, that's how I would want to read a book. And I love the idea of, like, okay, today I wake up, open it up, read this passage. Okay, now I get out of bed and do my thing. Rather than, like, I'm on chapter 3 and I'm 12 pages in and I'm never going to finish this and I hate myself.
Right. And like most books, beginning, middle, end, there's an arc. You got to kind of wait and go through the chapters to get to the good stuff. Every chapter is the good stuff in this book. You know what I mean? And there's nothing. Go ahead.
Oh, I'm so sorry. So I do agree that this is an excellent book cover to cover, but I just want to point out, if I can, a piece that was just like, well, boom, that I think, this is, I don't know if this is weird to say, but, like, having followed you for this long, it's like, when I see the book and it's like, wow, this is just really good, like, I'm proud of it too. I don't know if that makes sense, but here's a moment that I read and I was like, okay, you put this in here. I'm really happy to see this. And it was, if you're struggling with your dog, it's time to ask yourself a serious but simple question. Are you a force to be reckoned with or a force to be negotiated with? And all the passage that comes along with it. And I'm kind of sitting here as a trainer, like, are you, like, it's a fascinating thought. And I can appreciate, like, I'm sure that had a second thought to it, like, but ultimately, obviously you thought it was worth putting in the book, and I couldn't agree more. And it's fun because, again, like, I think you're kind of right that people should be a little more brave with putting information out there, and, because it is helpful. It's not just like utter nonsense. It's very good, but it dares a little bit more, which I think is important.
Yeah. I think it's a scary thing anytime anybody decides to, like, try and put out a book. So I get that, but to put out daily content, of your best ideas, what you've seen with your client, why they struggled, what 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 solutions you found, what solutions you continue to find, what you're thinking about, like that stuff to me. There's such a low cost, what is it, barrier to
Barrier to
entry.
entry.
Yeah, there's such a low barrier to entry, and there's so little fallout from it. If some people don't like it, just get rid of them. But
Right.
I really struggle with folks that are like, yeah, I'm just kind of sitting on it. It's like, man, take 30 minutes and write something, even if it's a one paragraph, and see if you can find something that might touch people. Right? It
Mm-hmm.
doesn't have to be the all encompassing, dog bomb, and everybody's
Right.
like, "Oh my God, that was the most ingenious thing." But
Right.
if you can get five people to start to see something or think something, you never know what you can do with it.
Right.
So
No, that's amazing.
Let me
That's
ask you
amazing.
this. Here's a funny question. So you guys are finishing up the second book. Uh,
yes,
was
hopefully.
this hopefully was this one? I remember asking you about the book. You and I had a call about a rescue dog that I was working with, and this was like a year and a half ago. And we were going over stuff, e-collar and everything else. And I remember right before we had hung up, you were like, "All right, anything else?" And I was like, "Yeah, do we have a release date on the second book?" And you chuckled. You were like, "Oh man, I don't know." And I was like, "Okay." But so here's so I just love that story. I was telling Alexis that too. I probably bothered her so much. So like here's my question. Um
Why didn't it come out 2 years ago?
no, no, was was this one easier to write? Was it harder to write? Was it the same?
um, it was probably harder to write because I held myself to a higher standard, writing wise. It was easier as far as having an editor and having a team that could actually offload some of that work for me. Um, but I think really trying to, like I said, I write all the posts originally, and a lot of them end up on social media. But when I go back through them, they have to be right on the money, and so that's a time consuming, uh, uh, unnerving, stressful kind of thing. Um, and to be, if I'm going to be really frank, it's like when you start off, and the way I start off is I've got this yellow legal pad, and then I start going through Facebook and Instagram and all these other spots and start looking what got the most traction, what seemed to resonate,
Mm,
what do I feel good about, and it goes on, and there's just page after page after page after page, and you look at that and you go, this will never get done. You know what I mean? You're literally
mm-hmm.
like, this will never get done, and you have to push back against that, and really just take the next step. And I think having a team helps, kind of like, come on, we can do it. We've done it before. But so it was easier in that I had more support, and we learned some valuable lessons. And it was harder in the fact that I was holding myself to a higher standard. But to be honest, I'm way more proud of this one. Um, we went out, we did a photo shoot multiple times, so the photographs would be like really special. So that's great. And like you know how it is. You put something out in the world, and you like cross your fingers that, like,
Right.
I hope it resonates. I hope it's not a
Yeah.
big pile of crap that everybody's like, nice
Yeah.
work, way to waste 2 years.
Right. Right.
So I'm really hopeful that it builds onto it. I don't know what trainers are going to do as far as, because they've been buying so many bulk orders of the first and then sending them out. If they're going to want to include this, or they're going to choose one or the other. I'll be curious to see how that works. And I don't mean that from a financial standpoint. I just mean logistically, like,
Sure.
are they going to buy two books and then say, like, here's your homework, which
Right.
has been a cool thing for so many trainers, because I think a lot of them, what I found is a lot of trainers are incredibly bright, and then when it comes to trying articulating
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
concepts and getting them into a way where they really land with their owners, they feel like they fall short, and
Yep.
they feel like this book kind of helps shore that up.
Yep.
And so I don't know. I hope it helps and continues to just do good things.